You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Feel like who art Ed?
Try to slice it.
Who art is Mr. Wood, art Ed me?
Good. Either way, it's ambiguous. It works on so many levels.
I know.
That's off to a great start.
Welcome to Who Arted, weekly art history for all ages. I'm your host, Kyle Wood, and today we're looking at Constantin Brâncuși. Constantin Brâncuși was a modern sculptor who altered the landscape of 20th century art. His radical simplification of form, embrace of primal energies, and profound engagement with materials laid the foundation for abstraction in sculpture and influenced generations of artists to come. He was born February 19th, 1876, in the peasant village of Hobota, nestled in the foothills of Romania's Carpathian Mountains. Now, Brâncuși's early life was steeped in rich traditions of Romanian folk art, but also the harsh reality of poverty and the strained relationship with his father, leading to multiple runaways, with one causing him to leave home for good at the age of just 11. Yet, this early immersion in the rural life with its handcrafted objects and strong connection to nature profoundly shaped his aesthetic sensibilities. The intricate wood carvings and the rhythmic forms of the peasant architecture would later find echoes in his mature work. Now, after a period of wandering, working various odd jobs, his aptitude for craft led him to the Craiova School of Arts and Crafts in 1894. Here, he excelled in woodworking and began to develop his sculptural skills. He graduated in 1898 and went on to continue his formal education in the Bucharest School of Fine Arts, where he received traditional academic training in sculpture. His early works from this period showed a mastery of classical techniques, but also a hint of a burgeoning desire to move beyond academic realism. In the autumn of 1903, he set off on a legendary artistic pilgrimage. Paris was the center of the modern art world in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Brâncuși wanted to be a part of the scene, mingling with the avant-garde artists, writers, and intellectuals who gathered at cafes to discuss art and philosophy. He had a scholarship to study in Paris, but he had very little money to get there. Brâncuși sold his watch and a few other possessions to raise money, but couldn't afford a train ticket all the way from Bucharest to Paris. So he walked. He walked through Romania, Hungary, Austria, and Switzerland to make it to France. While there's not a ton of great documentation, and he likely took short train and boat rides where he could, it does appear that he primarily made the voyage on foot. There are some anecdotes of him selling small sculptures or offering his skills as a wood carver to earn money along the way. It took months, but in the summer of 1904, he arrived in Paris. Some accounts elevate the walk to a spiritual journey, seeing the artist undergoing the hardship as a process of purification and transformation that would prepare him for the artistic breakthroughs in Paris. The reality was probably less romantic than what we like to imagine. He simply couldn't afford to make the trip by any other means, and like many migrants, he had very little, and he pushed himself to keep going toward what he saw as his only hope of finding opportunities and a better life. He arrived in Paris in the middle of summer, exhausted and malnourished. In later interviews, he would say he did it, quote, for the love of art, to see great art, end quote. Now, as difficult as it must have been, the story of the walk helped create a mystique around Brâncuși as a larger-than-life figure who embodied these romantic notions of a struggling artist with unwavering commitment to his artistic vision and a willingness to make sacrifices to pursue it. Now, after he arrived in Paris, Brâncuși briefly worked as an assistant in Auguste Rodin's studio. But after just a month, he left, famously declaring, quote, nothing grows under the shadow of great trees, end quote. He needed to forge his own path and felt he couldn't do that working under an established great like Rodin. The following years were a period of intense experimentation and artistic growth. Brâncuși immersed himself in the Parisian avant-garde. He befriended artists like Modigliani, Matisse, and Duchamp. He was particularly drawn to non-Western art. He especially liked African and oceanic sculpture, finding their simplified forms matched his own aspirations. He began to shed the academic realism, progressively simplifying his forms and seeking to capture the essence of his subjects rather than their literal appearance. The Kiss, the first version from 1907-1908, is one of his earliest masterpieces. It marks a decisive shift towards abstraction. The theme of lovers embracing was prevalent in art history, and Rodin's own famous sculpture, The Kiss, from 1882, was probably a pretty big point of reference. But Rodin's was a highly naturalistic and emotionally charged depiction. Brâncuși made a radical departure. The first iteration of Brâncuși's The Kiss was in plaster. It was well suited to modeling and refinement, and was later cast in bronze. In this version, the two figures, locked in an embrace, are fused into a single unified form, their features minimally rendered, suggesting rather than depicting their individuality. But in subsequent versions, Brâncuși made a profound shift, turning to stone as his medium and embracing the technique of direct carving. The sculptures became even more abstract, the figures reduced to elemental geometric forms. This choice of stone was far from arbitrary. It was central to his artistic philosophy. Stone is a material deeply rooted in human history. It's been used since antiquity for tools, monuments, and ritual objects. It possesses a permanence and a primal quality that resonates with the artist's search for essential forms. Unlike plaster or bronze, which are molded and cast, stone demands a subtractive process, a direct engagement between the artist and the material. Brâncuși believed that each block of stone held a latent form within it, and the sculptor's task was to reveal it through patient and respectful carving. This process for Brâncuși was a dialogue with the material, an attempt to uncover the inherent spirit of the stone. He said, quote, "The material itself dictates what you must do," end quote. By preserving the block-like form of the stone in The Kiss, Brâncuși emphasized its materiality, its weight, and its connection to the earth. The rough, unpolished surfaces of some versions further highlight the stone's natural texture and its inherent beauty. Now, one of the most common questions I think people have is, why reduce figures to such basic forms? For Brâncuși, it was about symbolism and capturing the essence of his subject. While specificity in portraiture can give us a window into a particular individual's character, Brâncuși sought a more universal expression. By stripping away extraneous details like clothing, which would place the subject in a specific time and a culture, he aimed to reveal the fundamental nature of human connection. The intertwined figures in The Kiss are not meant to represent a particular couple, but rather the universal experience of love and unity. The figures are reduced to their most essential forms, emphasizing their interconnectedness. The symmetry of the composition reinforces the idea of balance and harmony within the relationship. The eyes, formed by a single continuous line that encompasses both figures, further emphasize their shared being. The embrace is not just physical, but spiritual, a merging of the souls. The simplicity of the forms elevates the subject matter beyond the realm of the personal into the universal, making them symbols of any and all people. The Kiss is a timeless icon of love and unity, imbued with the weight and permanence of the stone from which it is carved. The rough texture allows the viewers to connect with the artistic process, and it's a reminder of the immense effort required to reduce stone to such neat, refined, and basic forms. Now, throughout the 1910s and 20s, Brâncuși continued to refine his distinctive style, producing iconic works like The Sleeping Muse and Bird in Space. In these sculptures, he pushed the boundaries of abstraction further, reducing human and animal forms into their essential archetypal essence. Now, often in art history, we talk about artists and works that push the boundaries, but Bird in Space literally pushed the boundaries of what could be considered art, at least for customs officials in the United States. Bird in Space became a subject of controversy when it was shipped to the US in 1926. Customs officials couldn't figure out what it was. They didn't recognize it as a work of art and instead tried to classify it as a utilitarian object. Specifically, they put it under kitchen utensils and hospital supplies. And this classification subjected it to a tariff of 40% of its value. Basically, under the law at the time, art could be imported for free, but other objects were subject to tariffs or taxes, and the customs people looked at Brâncuși's sculpture, Bird in Space, and said it didn't look enough like a bird to be considered art. There was a court case in which defining art and sculpture became key points of contention. The court asked an art critic by the name of Frank Crowninshield what would lead him to believe the object in question was a bird. And he said, quote, "It has the suggestion of flight. It suggests grace, aspiration, vigor, coupled with speed in the spirit of strength, potency, beauty, just as a bird does. But just the name, the title of this work, why, really, it does not mean much." End quote. Now, Brâncuși eventually won that case, and it became a landmark moment in the legal recognition of abstract art. Of course, I have to imagine it would still sting that you needed to go to such great lengths, hiring lawyers and calling in experts to argue that your masterpiece actually counts as art. In the end, Brâncuși got to explain the work and bring more people on board, saying, quote, "All my life I have sought only the essence of flight. Flight, what bliss," end quote. Apparently, many people came to agree with Brâncuși, as works from the Bird in Space series are a part of collections at prestigious cultural institutions including MoMA, the Met, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., the Seattle Art Museum, and the National Gallery of Australia, among others. While his works have become part of the collections of some of the greatest galleries in the world, Brâncuși's studio houses quite the collection itself. Brâncuși's studio in the Impasse Ronson became a legendary space, a meticulously arranged environment where his sculptures interacted with each other and with the natural light that filtered through the skylights. He considered his studio a total work of art, a living organism where each element played a vital role. The forms may appear simplified, but that doesn't mean they were easy to create. I would argue that works which appear simple can actually be the most technically difficult, because when the work is neat, clean, and precise, even the slightest error becomes glaring. Brâncuși was known for his meticulous craftsmanship, spending hours polishing his bronze and marble sculptures to achieve a luminous, almost ethereal surface. The simplified forms were a result of a lot of complicated thought, philosophy, and very careful, deliberate craftsmanship. He said, quote, "Simplicity is not an end in art, but one arrives at simplicity in spite of oneself, in approaching the real sense of things," end quote. Constantin Brâncuși continued to work and exhibit until his death in Paris on March 16, 1957. He bequeathed his studio and its contents to the French state, ensuring that his unique artistic environment would be preserved for prosperity. He was a pivotal figure in the development of modern sculpture, a visionary artist who redefined the very nature of the art form. His unwavering dedication to simplicity, his profound respect for materials, and his relentless pursuit of essential form continue to inspire and challenge artists today. Brâncuși's sculptures, with their timeless beauty and profound spiritual resonance, stand as enduring testaments to the power of art to transcend the limitations of the physical world and touch the very essence of human experience. His life, a journey from humble beginnings to international acclaim, serves as a powerful reminder that true artistic greatness does not come from imitating the greats that came before you. I mean, we have to learn from those who came before, but go a step further. You have to have the courage to forge your own path and listen to that inner voice that guides the creative spirit. This concludes this week's episode of Who Arted, part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. If you found this tolerable, please leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast app. You can find images of the work being discussed this week and every week on social media at Who Arted Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, and of course on the website whoartedpodcast.com. Podcast done.